been a really great month since the last video, and there's a lot of things I'm excited to show you. I've added a number of small gameplay improvements this month, such as quick reloads if you fall off a ledge or drown, and a number of new effects, such as some highlights for docks in the distance to help you find your way while canoeing, as well as some other effects which you'll have to discover for yourself. Of course, as you saw in the title, the biggest update this month has been the introduction of stealth mechanics, and the very beginning of the monster implementation. We'll get to that in just a minute, but first I want to give you a bit of an update on the animal activation from the last video. So in the last devlog, we talked about how I was using animals for temporary color restores, and how they should be activated. You folks gave great feedback and some really creative ideas, so thank you to everyone for that. What I decided to go with was a really popular suggestion, and basically involves breaking the flock into smaller groups and having a main sensor bird in each. The idea here is that the player needs to activate the sensor of each group, and that the group will head off to eventually form the full flock. So as you can see in this demo area, there are 3 kind of subgroups or sub-flocks to the main flock. And each of these has a primary sensor bird. It's kind of glowing and indicating that it's special compared to the others. And each of the groups could have different means of reaching them, so some of them might require simple exploration where, you just have to find the path there, whereas others might require some light platforming, where you can't simply walk there, you have to do, a little bit more navigation to get to an area. Others still might require some problem solving, so you might have an instance where, like here, this bridge is missing, and there's seemingly no path to the flock. And so you'll have to do a little bit of problem solving to find a way there. So the idea is that different groups can have different challenges to reach them, and it kind of mixes up the gameplay a little bit. And then once all the groups are restored, they basically go and form the full flock, and you can proceed with the game. So I've added a couple new animals, in addition to the birds, and I've also added the national flower of Scotland, the thistle, as an occasional stationary restoration point. The idea here is that you run faster in the colored areas and for a short time afterwards, so these can act as like a little hidden speed boost throughout the levels. So just before we start talking about stealth, I have to take a moment to remind you to wishlist the game on Steam. It's just a small thing, it's a simple button, but it really helps support the game so much because it basically lets Steam know that there's an audience for the game and that people care about it, and helps it stand out from the crowd. So if you don't mind hitting farewellnorth.com/steam and just clicking that add to wishlist button, it's a huge help for me. Alright, so since I was a kid, the stealth genre has probably been my favorite. I love the creativity of the games, the numerous ways to approach the levels, and the unique gadgets you get to employ. Now, at the same time, Farewell North is definitely a casual game, and I've been very adamant from the beginning that it won't have combat. But I've also said that it will have stealth elements, so I think it's worth clarifying that here. So, Farewell North is definitely not trying to be Splinter Cell or Hitman, and you won't be killing monsters and hiding the bodies. As much as I love these games, I've always found that the ability to just murder your way through the levels is kind of a cheap way to get out of a problem, so I'm kind of happy Farewell North won't have that possibility. Instead, the stealth in Farewell North is going to be much more about sneaking and avoiding monsters. It's not going to be a full-fledged stealth game. Like I said, it's not Splinter Cell and it's not Hitman, but instead it's going to have elements of stealth mixed into the main gameplay. So if you played something like Little Nightmares 2, I think that's probably a good comparison. It's a little bit closer to what I'm going for. It's just a bit of tension and suspense without the horror of Little Nightmares, but sneaking around and kind of avoiding detection rather than having any kind of combat. So, with that kind of explanation of what I'm going for, let's get into the game and how it actually works. So, stealth games are inherently well broken down into certain states, and the first thing I tried to do was define what the states in Farewell North are going to be. So I came up with 5 for the player and the monsters. So first we have being out of the stealth area, meaning you're not even in the room, there's nothing going on. Next we have evading/distracting, meaning the monster's been distracted, more on that later. Or hidden and patrolling, which means that the player is not seen and the monster's just kind of wandering around doing their, they're searching and doing their thing. Then we have hidden/suspicious, meaning the player is unseen and has just been spotted, but the monster isn't fully aware of them yet. And finally is detected/alerted, meaning the player has been found and the monster's basically attacking them. So with the list of states defined, the next thing to do is to figure out what causes them to move from one state to another. So in the end I came up with this whole kind of flow, where again the green stickies represent the state of the characters and the purple stickies are essentially the actions that cause the states to change. So for example, if we're in the out of stealth area, then the trigger to move to the next would be to enter the stealth area. You can think of this like the player entering the room or the area where the monsters are in. So now the monsters can turn on their vision cones and whatnot and start searching for the player. If the player or the girl is seen, or the dog barks, or the dog pings color in the monster's vicinity, then that triggers the next state, the hidden/suspicious state. And this is essentially a 1 to 2 second state where the player has a small grace period to get back to cover. This is just to make the gameplay a little more forgiving. Remember, it's meant to be a casual game rather than like a hardcore stealth game, so we don't want to punish the player for a slight mistake. So if the player is still visible after 1 to 2 seconds, and then we go to the detected/alerted state, the monster actually starts attacking the player, and the player starts running, and so on and so forth. So you have all these states, and you have all these triggers that transition them between states. And so this was the first step to kind of map it all out and figure out what is it that the characters can do, and what causes them to move between these behaviors. Okay, so hopefully that's all clear, but it should make more sense in a second. So looking at this in-game, I put a little label underneath the monster so you can see what their state is. So you can see that we've entered the area, they go to their patrolling state. As we approach and the monster eventually sees us, it's going to go to suspicious for just a second, and then become alerted and start attacking. So the key thing though that I wanted to do that's a little bit unique is that using the color distracts the monster. So basically they always attack color with the highest priority. So if you ever activate color, they completely divert their attention and focus on that instead of you. So this gives you a way to kind of evade and distract the monsters and get away, and it allows the color to play in terms of puzzles to draw them away and that kind of thing. Of course, the monster can't become permanently distracted though, so what I came up with was this idea that they kind of drain color out of the world. Now, I haven't animated the monsters yet or done any VFX for them, but I'm just kind of talking about the color dissipation effect here. So I added this in where the kind of temporary color restoration has basically health, and the monsters basically drain it away, and as it does, you can see the color kind of lift out of the ground and kind of fade away. So I think it's a cool effect. It's still early, it's like a first pass, so there's going to be more work on that, but leave your comments down below, let me know what you think of it. So next I wanted to build a lot of mood into the stealth areas, because this is all meant to be a representation of mental health and depression and that kind of thing. So once the player enters the stealth area, I introduced this kind of world effect, which is meant to, represent that mental distress and fogginess. There's basically a couple layers of like noise along all the surfaces that's kind of subtly moving around, and it builds up to this kind of interesting effect I'm quite proud of. I think with some moody ambience on top of this, it's going to be really nice. And of course, when you leave the area, the effect dissipates, so it might not seem like much, but now that we have the core stealth mechanics in place, it can start to focus on the actual monsters and level design over the next month, which is really exciting. So I have one more thing that I want to show you, mostly because it was a great technical challenge and I'm really happy with the solution. So we're going to go a little bit behind the scenes now. Since this is more of a casual game, I don't think it's fair to expect perfection from the player in the stealth areas, so I want it to be really obvious to them where they will or will not be seen. A lot of games use this idea of a vision cone for stealth. It's a great way to build fairness in the game because there's no ambiguity. You can see very clearly what the monster can and cannot see and whether you will or will not be spotted. So I wanted to make sure that the visual appearance of the vision cone perfectly matches what the monster can actually see. So in order to do this, the vision cone needs to adjust itself to the environment on the fly and stop when it reaches an obstruction to its view, such as a wall or a tree or, whatever. Using light would be a pretty easy way to go about this. However, light works in a weird way in Farewell North due to the coloring effect, so it's not really an option. So what I came up with was this technique to actually modify the mesh or the shape of the vision cone at runtime. Essentially the way this is done is if you can imagine drawing a line from the eyes of the monster to each of those green dots, and I'm just recoloring them red here to show you what happens. So if it reaches an obstruction, so for instance this wall, it'll basically move the dot forward or move the vertex of the cone forward, and so this reshapes the object. So it's constantly drawing these lines every single frame to every single dot and seeing, does anything intersect this? If not, leave it in its default position, otherwise move the vertex forward. And so the idea here is that the vision cone's always reshaping itself to perfectly match what you'd expect the monster to see. So if you're standing behind something, the vision cone won't go through that wall. If I go to wireframe mode, you can see here that instead of being a cone, it's now got this like box at the bottom because those vertices were blocked by the wall. And so it's constantly reshaping itself like that. Since this was done every frame, it can be computationally expensive, so I wanted to make sure that the raycasts or these lines run asynchronously and they run across all the CPU cores to spread out the work. And on top of that, I never changed the number of vertices of the mesh, so there's never any garbage collection required. So basically the mesh is always the exact same mesh, it's just slightly reshaped. So there's no garbage being generated and everything's done asynchronously. And so with these optimizations, it runs in roughly 1/10 of a millisecond on a mid-range computer. And so assuming you only ever have a handful of monsters on screen at any given time, that's completely acceptable and there's no frame rate impact. There's also a few more optimizations I could make, which I'm probably going to do just because it's a fun technical challenge, but I would say it's already in a shippable state now, so I'm quite happy with the result. If you want to talk about the technical implementation of this, feel free to leave a comment down below. I'm happy to talk through it. We also have a technical chat channel on Discord, which you can find a link to in the description. And we, talk about all these kind of technical details, which I really enjoy those conversations. So yeah, if you want to talk about that kind of stuff, feel free to join the Discord. Just one last thing on the subject of Discord. I'm really excited to say that we're actually going to be having a small community game jam from April 10th to April 18th. It's going to be very low pressure, there's no ratings or judging, so if you want to participate, maybe do your first game jam, come join the Discord and there'll be more details there. Alright everyone, I hope this has been an interesting look at how I'm designing the stealth mechanics for Farewell North. Let me know your thoughts down below, don't forget to like and subscribe to the video, and if you have any suggestions for a stealth game that I should check out, leave those as well. In any case, I'll see you next time, and bye for now.